Hey, deep divers. Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to get into something pretty heavy. Forgiveness.
Ooh, that's a big one.
It is. And, we always hear how forgiveness is good for us,
Right.
but this source we've got, it really digs into the nitty-gritty, like the how and the why.
I like that, getting specific.
Yeah. So it blends these scientific studies with biblical teachings, which I find uh, super interesting.
That's a cool combo because I feel like we often see those as separate things, you know? Like
Well,
science is over here and spirituality is over there.
totally.
Yeah.
And this source brings them together in a way that's like, hey, they actually support each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm always saying. It's
Yeah.
not either, it's both hands.
Exactly. And it makes you think about forgiveness differently. Like it's not just this moral high ground we're supposed to reach.
Right. It's not just about being a good person.
Right. It actually impacts our well-being, like on a physical level.
That's what I find so fascinating. The source talks about how holding on to anger, it's like keeping your body in this constant state of stress.
Oh, yeah. It mentions cortisol.
Yeah.
That's the stress hormone.
Exactly. And there are all these studies showing that people who practice forgiveness, they have lower cortisol levels.
Whoa. So it's like scientifically proven that letting go of anger can actually calm our bodies down.
It's pretty amazing. It's like our bodies are literally designed to forgive.
Okay, so we've got the science backing it up.
Yeah.
But this source goes even deeper. It connects this whole idea of forgiveness to the Bible.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're talking. I grew up with the Bible, so that's like my jam.
Mine too. And I immediately think of that verse about forgiving others, so God will forgive us.
Oh, yeah. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
That's the one. But this source goes beyond that. It digs into specific passages like Ephesians 4.32, where it says, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you."
I love that verse. It's like a direct instruction manual for how to live a good life.
Right. And it makes it clear that forgiveness is not optional for Christians. It's like a fundamental part of our faith.
And it's not just about following rules. It's about like transforming our hearts.
Totally. Like Matthew 6.14-15 talks about how if we don't forgive others, God won't forgive us.
Ooh, that's a powerful one. It's like the cycle of grace.
Right. We receive forgiveness, and in turn we offer it to others.
And this source points out it's not just about getting on God's good side, it's about spiritual growth.
Yeah, like deepening our connection with God.
Makes you wonder if forgiveness is so central to our spiritual well-being, should we be surprised that it also affects our physical health?
It's like it's all connected. Mind, body, and spirit.
Totally. It's like God knew what he was doing when he made us this way.
Mind blown. Okay, so we've got the science, the spiritual foundation, but let's be real, forgiveness isn't always easy.
Especially in today's world, you know, with social media and everything.
Ugh, don't even get me started. It feels like everyone's just waiting to be offended these days.
Right. It's like we've lost the ability to give each other the benefit of the doubt.
Totally.
And it's not just about other people either. This source talks about self-forgiveness, which, let's be honest, is a whole other beast.
Oh, yeah. Self-forgiveness is tough, especially with all the pressure to be perfect.
Seriously. It's like we're constantly comparing ourselves to these curated Instagram feeds, and then we beat ourselves up for not measuring up.
And that's where self-compassion comes in, which this source talks about. It's not about letting ourselves off the hook for bad behavior.
Right. It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness we'd offer a friend.
Exactly.
Wow.
We're all human. We all make mistakes. And it's okay to give ourselves a break.
I love that. So instead of dwelling on our flaws, we can choose to focus on our strengths.
And on our growth. We're all works in progress, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about why forgiveness is so important, both of others and ourselves.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do it? The source mentions some steps, right?
It does. And it starts with acknowledging the hurt, like really sitting with those uncomfortable feelings.
Ooh, that's the hard part. Sometimes those feelings are so intense, it feels easier to just ignore them. I know what you mean. But this source compares it to trying to sweep dirt under a rug.
Okay, yeah, I get it. You can't just pretend the hurt isn't there.
Exactly, and those unaddressed emotions, they can come out in unhealthy ways.
Like lashing out at others or even like turning to unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Exactly. So we acknowledge the hurt, and then the source suggests reaching out for support.
Okay, so talk to a friend, a therapist, a spiritual advisor.
Whoever you trust. Having someone to listen without judgment can be so helpful.
And for people of faith, there's also prayer, right?
Absolutely. Prayer can be a powerful tool for healing and transformation.
So we're acknowledging the hurt, seeking support, and praying for guidance. What's next?
The next step is a tough one, trying to understand the person who hurt us.
Ooh, that's a challenge. especially when you've been deeply hurt.
I know. It's not about condoning their actions, but trying to see things from their perspective.
Like maybe they were acting out of their own pain.
Exactly. Or maybe they didn't even realize the impact of their actions. Okay, I can see how that would be helpful. But it's still hard to let go of the anger.
It is. But remember, forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about us.
Right, what do you mean?
It's about freeing ourselves from the bitterness and resentment that's poisoning our own hearts.
So it's about shifting our focus from blame to understanding.
You got it. It's about recognizing that the person who hurt us is also a human being, flawed and imperfect, just like us.
They may have their own baggage, their own struggles.
Exactly. And that doesn't excuse their behavior, of course, but it can help us see them in a more compassionate light.
Compassion, that's the key word, right?
Absolutely. Compassion is essential for forgiveness. It allows us to see the humanity in the person who hurt us.
Which makes it easier to let go of some of that anger. Okay, so we've acknowledged the hurt, sought support, prayed for guidance, and tried to understand the other person. Are we getting close to actually forgiving yet?
We're getting there. The next step is to make a conscious decision to forgive.
So it's not just about feeling it, it's about choosing it. Exactly. It's a deliberate act of will. It's saying, I choose to let go of this anger and resentment.
I choose to release this person from my judgment.
Yes. And that takes courage and strength.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's like my head gets it, but my heart is still holding on.
I hear you. But remember, forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength.
It's about rising above the hurt.
Exactly. It's saying, I'm not going to let this control my life. I'm going to choose peace over bitterness.
I love that. Okay, so we've made the decision to forgive. What's next?
The final step is letting go. This means releasing the hurt, the anger, the resentment, even the desire for revenge.
Wow, that's a lot to let go of.
It is, but it's so freeing. It's about letting go of the story we've been telling ourselves about the situation.
And choosing to create a new story, one that's filled with hope and healing.
Exactly. Forgiveness is about moving on. It's about choosing to live in the present moment, free from the chains of the past.
Powerful stuff. Okay, deep divers, that's a wrap for part 1. Join us for part 2, where we'll dive even deeper into the practical steps of forgiveness and how it can transform our lives.
We'll be back. Don't go anywhere.
All right. Deep divers, back for more on forgiveness. So in part 1, we talked about how forgiveness is good for us, like scientifically and spiritually.
Yeah, it's not just some fluffy, feel-good concept.
Exactly. It's like this superpower we have to actually change our lives.
And our bodies. Don't forget about the cortisol.
Right. Lower stress, better health, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
But then we got into how hard forgiveness can be.
Yeah, especially with how crazy the world is these days.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Because this source dives into how modern life, like social media and all that, can make forgiveness extra challenging.
Ugh, social media, don't get me started. It's like a breeding ground for judgment and negativity.
Seriously. Everyone's got an opinion and they're not afraid to share it, even if it's hurtful.
And it's not just about other people's judgment. It's about our own, too.
Ooh, yeah. That inner critic can be brutal.
Right. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others to these perfect little snapshots of their lives.
And then we feel like we're not good enough, not skinny enough, not successful enough. It's exhausting.
It is. And it's a recipe for, like, self-sabotage, because when we don't measure up, we tend to punish ourselves.
Okay, so what's the antidote to all this negativity and self-judgment?
Well, the source talks a lot about self-compassion.
Self-compassion. I like the sound of that. What's that all about?
It's about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we'd offer to a friend.
So instead of beating myself up for every little mistake, I should be more like, hey, you're human. It's okay. We'll do better next time.
Exactly. It's about giving ourselves permission to be imperfect, to mess up sometimes, and to learn from our mistakes.
I'm definitely going to need to practice that
Yeah.
because I'm like the queen of self-criticism.
We all are, to some extent. But the
Mhm.
more we cultivate self-compassion, the easier it becomes to forgive ourselves and others.
Okay, so that's self-forgiveness. But what about forgiving others? Like, how do we actually move through that process?
Well, the source lays out some practical steps.
Okay, give it to me. I'm ready to take notes.
Step 1. Acknowledge the hurt. Don't try to bury it or pretend it's not there.
Oh, that's tough. Sometimes it feels easier to just shove those feelings down.
I know. But this source compares it to having a splinter. You can ignore it for a while, but eventually it's going to get infected.
Okay, yeah, I see your point.
Right.
Got to deal with the hurt, so we acknowledge it. Then what?
Then the source suggests reaching out for support. Talk to someone you trust, a friend, a family member, A therapist.
Someone who could just listen without judgment.
Exactly. And for those who are religious, prayer can also be a powerful tool.
Right. Like asking for guidance and strength to move through the hurt.
Exactly. So we've acknowledged the hurt sought support and maybe prayed about it. What's next?
This is where it gets really tricky, right?
It can be. The next step is to try to understand the person who hurt you.
Wait, hold up. Understand them. How am I supposed to do that when they've done something terrible?
It's not about condoning their actions. It's about trying to see things from their perspective, to have some empathy.
Okay, but how does that help me forgive them?
Well, when we understand where someone's coming from, even if we don't agree with their actions, it can make them seem less like a monster and more like a flawed human being.
So instead of seeing them as the villain, I can see them as someone who's also struggling, who's maybe made some bad choices.
Exactly. And that can make it easier to let go of some of the anger and resentment.
Okay, I'm starting to get it. So we acknowledge the hurt, we seek support, we pray, we try to understand the other person. Then what?
Then comes the big one, making a conscious decision to forgive.
So it's not just a feeling, it's a choice.
Exactly. It's an act of will. It's saying, I'm not going to let this hurt control me anymore. I choose to forgive.
Wow, that's powerful. But it sounds really hard.
It can be. But remember, forgiveness is not about the other person. It's about you.
What do you mean?
It's about freeing yourself from the burden of anger, resentment, and bitterness.
So forgiveness is actually an act of self-care.
You could say that. It's about choosing peace and healing for yourself.
I like that. It's not about letting the other person off the hook. It's about setting yourself free.
Exactly. And that leads us to the final step, letting go.
Letting go. That sounds so simple, but I bet it's the hardest part.
It can be. Letting go means releasing the hurt, the anger, the desire for revenge.
It's about making peace with the past and moving on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about choosing to create a new story, one that's not defined by the hurt you've experienced.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. But what if I get stuck? Like, what if I try all these steps and I still feel angry and resentful?
That's totally normal. Forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. It's okay if it takes time.
So what can I do when I feel like I'm hitting a wall?
The source suggests reminding yourself of the benefits of forgiveness. We've talked
Yeah.
about the science, the reduced stress, the improved health.
Right, and the spiritual benefits too. Like
Yeah.
greater peace and a deeper connection with God.
Exactly. And sometimes just remembering why you're doing this can be enough to keep you moving forward.
Okay, so I remind myself of the benefits. What else can I do?
The source also recommends practicing gratitude.
Gratitude.
Yeah.
How does that help with forgiveness?
When we're focused on what we're grateful for, it shifts our perspective. It makes it harder to dwell on the negative stuff.
So instead of focusing on the hurt, I can choose to focus on the good things in my life.
Exactly. It could be anything big or small. A sunny day, a good cup of coffee, a kind word from a friend.
It's about actively looking for the good, even when things are tough.
And that can make a huge difference in our ability to forgive.
Okay, I'm going to try that. So we've got reminding ourselves of the benefits, practicing gratitude, anything else.
The source also talks about the importance of mindfulness.
Mindfulness, isn't that like meditation and stuff?
It can be, but it's really just about paying attention to our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So instead of letting my thoughts run wild, I become more aware of them.
Exactly. You observe your thoughts without getting caught up in them. This creates space between you and your thoughts.
So I can choose which thoughts to focus on instead of letting them control me.
Exactly. And when we can do that, it becomes much easier to let go of negative thoughts and emotions like anger and resentment.
Wow, this is all starting to make so much sense.
Oh.
So we've got acknowledging the hurt, seeking support, praying, trying to understand the other person, making a conscious decision to forgive, letting go, reminding ourselves of the benefits, practicing gratitude, and practicing mindfulness. Is there anything else we can do to support ourselves on this journey of forgiveness?
There's one more thing, and it's something we've already touched on, self-compassion.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you're not perfect at forgiving.
Exactly. Forgiveness is a process, and it's okay if it takes time. Be patient with yourself. Offer yourself the same grace and understanding that you'd offer to a friend.
I love that. So
Yeah.
it's not about being hard on ourselves. It's about being gentle and supportive.
Exactly. Because ultimately, forgiveness is about healing, and that includes healing ourselves.
Well said. Okay. Deep divers. I think we've covered the practical side of forgiveness pretty thoroughly. But before we wrap up part 2, I want to highlight one more thing from our source material. It talks about this profound link between forgiveness and freedom.
Yes. Forgiveness sets us free.
It does. When we hold on to anger and resentment, it's like we're chained to the past.
But when we forgive, we break those chains. We release ourselves from the prison of our own bitterness.
It's like we can finally breathe again.
Exactly. Forgiveness is about liberation. It's about reclaiming our power and choosing to live in the present moment.
Wow, that's so inspiring. It's not just about letting go of the past, it's about embracing the freedom of the present.
That's exactly it. And that freedom opens us up to so much more, more joy, more peace, more love.
Okay, deep divers. That's it for part 2. Join us for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore how forgiveness can transform not only our own lives, but the world around us. All right, deep divers, we're back, wrapping up our forgiveness deep dive. And I'm like genuinely feeling lighter after those first 2 parts.
Me too. It's amazing how just talking about this stuff can shift your perspective.
Right. So we talked about the science, the
Yeah.
spiritual side, the practical steps, even that connection to feeling free.
hmm
Now I want to get into like the real game changer, the transformative power of forgiveness.
Okay, yeah. This source goes deep on how forgiveness isn't just about letting go. It's about growth. Like, it can actually change our brains.
Whoa, I remember reading about that. Something about how it boosts empathy and compassion, like literally rewires our brains.
That's exactly it. The more we practice forgiveness, the stronger those neural pathways become for empathy and compassion.
So it's like working out a muscle.
Exactly. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Okay, so it's not just a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process that changes us from the inside out.
Yeah,
That's pretty powerful.
it really is. And it doesn't stop there. The source also talks about how forgiveness ripples outward, impacting not just us, but our relationships, our communities, even the world.
Yeah, I remember that part. Something about forgiveness as a social force. The source even mentioned the Forgiveness Project, right?
Yes. That project is all about sharing stories of people who've forgiven in like the most extreme situations. Situations most of us can't even fathom.
It's like if they can forgive, maybe there's hope for the rest of us. But how does personal forgiveness scale up to changing the world? That feels like a big leap.
It does, but think about it. When we choose forgiveness, we break a cycle of anger, resentment, violence.
Oh yeah, that cycle has been going on for like forever.
Exactly. And forgiveness is a way to disrupt it, to create space for understanding and compassion instead.
And that's something we desperately need more of, especially these days. It feels like everywhere you turn, there's division, anger, hatred. It's exhausting.
It can be, but that's why forgiveness is so important. It's like a radical act of rebellion against all that negativity.
It's about choosing love over hate,
Mm.
compassion over judgment, peace over violence.
Beautifully put. And every time we make that choice, even in our own small corner of the world, we're contributing to a more peaceful, more loving world.
Powerful stuff. So deep divers, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something that really resonated with me from the source. It's a quote from Mark 11.25. And when you stand praying, if you hold anything against anyone, forgive them, so that your Father in heaven may forgive you your sins.
Ooh, that's a good one. It connects forgiveness to our relationship with God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and to ourselves. It's like this reminder that forgiveness is multifaceted. It's not just about the other person. It's about our own spiritual well-being.
And ultimately, choosing forgiveness is a gift we give to ourselves, to those around us, and to the world.
So well said. Deep divers, thank you for joining us on this exploration of forgiveness. We hope you've gained some insights and inspiration along the way. And until next time, may you find peace, healing, and freedom through the power of forgiveness.